Joe Biden has called off his trip to Australia, and the Quad meet in Sydney has also been cancelled. Just yesterday, Anthony Albanese said he expected the visit would go ahead. Today, the US president rang him to cancel 1 week before he was due to arrive. His reason for cancelling: needing to sort out the debt ceiling crisis before the US government runs out of money. Biden will attend the G7 leaders meeting in Hiroshima this weekend, but instead of visiting PNG and Australia, he'll fly back to Washington on Sunday.
The president is cancelling part of his upcoming overseas trip, returning to the U.S. Sunday after the G7 economic meeting in Japan.
Biden cancelled plans to visit Australia and Papua New Guinea following the G7 in Japan, amid criticism he'd be out of the country for roughly half the time left to hash out a deal.
I hope they all realize the world's watching.
President Biden, quite frankly, has been talking about how urgent this is, but not actually acting like it's urgent.
Yeah.
Going away for the G7.
But change his trip on the back end. He's
hardly.
Right.
I mean,
he's not going to Australia or something else.
Hardly changing it.
The White House released a statement saying the Quad remained a priority for the president. The statement said the president spoke to Prime Minister Albanese earlier today to inform him that he will be postponing his trip to Australia. He also invited the Prime Minister for an official state visit at a time to be agreed to. The statement said the president has made clear that members of Congress from both parties and chambers must come together to prevent default, as they have 78 times before. The statement went on to say that revitalising and reinvigorating our alliances and advancing partnerships like the Quad remains a key priority for the president. It says this is vital to their ability for their foreign policy goals and to better promote global stability and prosperity. The White House said, we look forward to finding other ways to engage with Australia, the Quad, Papua New Guinea and the leaders of the Pacific Islands Forum in the coming year. In Australia, our political leaders said the decision was disappointing, just 7 days out from the summit in Sydney. Albanese said the Quad leaders of US, Australia, India and Japan will still meet on the sidelines of the Group of Seven summit.
He expressed very much his disappointment at being unable to come to Sydney for the Quad leaders meeting and address the Parliament. All four leaders, President Biden, Prime Minister Kishida, Prime Minister Modi and myself, will be at the G7.
Well, look, obviously it's disappointing, but completely understanding. There are domestic issues that the President has to attend to.
Look, obviously disappointed. The Quad will go ahead and those important national security discussions will proceed.
We understand that President Biden has some domestic political issues to attend to.
Commentators say Albanese has been left red-faced over the cancellation. The Fin Review's Phil Coorey writes that it's a big embarrassment for Albanese, who'd confirmed Biden's attendance just hours earlier. And another report in the Fin said it will rob the Prime Minister of the international spotlight that comes with hosting the leader of the free world. The front pages of today's newspapers also had exclusive stories that Biden was going to address Australian Parliament. In the US, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is warning, though, that the US government could run out of money next month. This is known as the X date. The Republicans are making several demands before agreeing to lift the debt ceiling. They want to cut spending, or they want Biden to cut spending and expedite domestic energy projects. Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says there's still negotiations underway and a lot of talking still to do before the party will agree to extend the government's borrowing limit.
Appoint somebody from the president's team who can work with the speaker's team to see if we could come to an agreement. That is what the decision was made in this meeting. So the structure of how we negotiate has improved. So it now gives you a better opportunity, even though we only have a few days to get it done. Had we done this back 97 days ago, we'd already have a bill passed.
A debt default in the US would be catastrophic, both for America and globally. Federal workers wouldn't be paid, and Treasury is warning that there'd be a surge in interest rates. This could lead to a recession in America, and that could have an impact on global markets.
And a default would reverse all of the hard-earned progress that we've made, and it would set us back even further. Our economy would suddenly find itself in an unprecedented economic and financial storm.
Now, the debt ceiling is currently $31.4 trillion. $31.4 trillion. Debt hit that unprecedented level in January. While the US has reached crisis point like this many times before, the last you'll remember in 2013, if an agreement isn't reached, this would be the first ever debt default. More than 140 top chief executives have written to Biden and congressional leaders pushing for a deal to get done. But Biden is calling on Republicans to simply support an increase to the debt ceiling, despite Democrats playing politics like this in the past. For the meantime, the standoff remains.
I'm postponing the Australia portion of the trip and my stop in Papua New Guinea in order to be back for the final negotiations with congressional leaders. And I spoke today with Prime Minister Albanese of Australia and a short time ago and let him know what was going on. There was an overwhelming consensus, I think, in today's meeting of the congressional leaders that defaulting on the debt is simply not an option. Our economy would fall into recession. It would devastate retirement accounts, increase borrowing costs, and according to Moody's, nearly 8 million Americans would lose their jobs and our international reputation would be damaged